Long before the Infinity, long before the frigates, the bulk of the UNSC's ground forces were deployed via carrier, and none were more prevalent than the Orion class. Hey people, Mark here, and welcome to another ship breakdown. Today we're gonna step, once again, back in time to an older ship, the Orion-class assault carrier. This one should be short, as there are no actual appearances of this ship outside of Halo fleet battles or the Encyclopedia, but it has been discussed in some canon fodders too. But first I wanted to mention that if you like me, I have another channel where I make more generalized content, as well as a Twitch channel where I for now multi-stream with this one. I'm going to be streaming Summer Game Fest and all the subsequent events, including the Starfield Showcase, which is of particular interest to my channel. Any love you could show that stuff would be appreciated, but if not, and you just like Halo, that's fine too. Like and subscribe, and super thanks, and all that. On with the video. The Orion-class assault carrier was most prevalent during the insurrection, and in its prime it was as much the face of the UNSC as the frigates are now. Built by, yet again, Synoviet heavy machinery, the Orion was specialized in, as the class implies, planetary assaults. Measuring in at 2,220 meters and weighing 40 million tons, the ship is the second smallest carrier in the UNSC, beaten only by the absolutely minuscule Poseidon-class light carrier, which measures in at 719 meters, and will be covered another time. The ship was state-of-the-art when it was introduced in 2473, and included miniaturized and modular factory systems that would later be improved upon and incorporated into the 2526 refit of several Phoenix-class colony ships, most notably the Spirit of Fire. Chemical processors like those found on colony support ships like the Star Charter were also included, and together these features allow the Orion to produce fuel, spare parts, and, in some cases, manufacture combat vehicles without external assistance. They were known to also carry cargo lighters and resource gatherers, probably similar to the D-82 EST Darter, the D-20 Heron, the D-96 TCE Albatross, or the Ibis-class freighter. The strength of the Orion lies in the sheer amount of armor, infantry, and equipment that can be carried on board. That said, we don't know the specifics of the complement. We don't know how many of what vehicles or armors or weapons were on board. The best we get is that it carried a nondescript number of Marines and tanks. What we do know is that an Orion-led task force was enough to strike fear into the hearts of a rebellious colony, and they often served as flagships once war broke out with the Covenant. Most Orions were lost with all hands during desperate defensive engagements over planets that would have once been the assault carrier's insurrectionist targets. The objective typically given to all UNSC ships in the early years of the war was to buy time for civilians and military assets to be evacuated to the inner colonies. The Orions that survived this stage would form the core of battle groups that were utilized in long-range offensives in an attempt to disrupt Covenant supply lines. As a carrier, the Orion class was equipped with a shipborne Mac 20 years before the first destroyer, and almost 30 years before the Shargan class. And almost 30 years before the Karin class, the first Mac-equipped frigate. The carrier is actually stated to have two separate heavy 90C1E1 Macs, rather than a Mac battery with multiple launch rails like the Halberd, or a Mac battery with multiple cannons like the Phoenix. Simply two separate Macs, which is a feature that would return later in the refit of the Diligence-class destroyer. 70 M58 Archer missile pods adorn the ship, as well as 12 M870 Rampart Point defense guns. UNSC carriers all have tons of missiles on board, much like current modern aircraft carriers, to allow for other members of the fleet to focus on their own specializations. The only known ships of this class are the UNSC Orion, the lead ship of the class, and the UNSC Fifth Winter. None of the specific engagements these ships took part in are described, but the Fifth Winter is known to have taken part in the Human Covenant War. The Fifth Winter was also used as the inspiration for a simulated routine personnel transfer at Outpost Discovery, a public relations project that served to inspire and recruit the next generation of UNSC personnel. The Orion class is an assault carrier. As such, it was not built with the sole function of naval combat in mind. The armament does allow the Orion to defend itself, but ultimately the ship will require an escort if it will be participating in any engagements in the vacuum. The ships were decimated by Covenant fleets, which isn't anything new, even for so-called ship killers. But should the Orion be caught without a destroyer, frigate, or cruiser by its side, it's done. It's a bit unfair to judge a carrier for that. I mean, if a Gerald R. Ford class aircraft carrier was sailing along and was set upon by a full fleet of ships, I mean, it's fucked. That's why carriers never leave home alone, so the only knock I can give this ship is that it was built too early. It works perfectly fine as a standard carrier, we just don't know how much it can carry. It's probably a quite hefty load, plus it has factories on board, which is a feature the Epoch, Poseidon, and Punic carriers all lack. So the Orion-class carrier finds itself firmly in the bracket of well-balanced but unprepared for the Human Covenant War, which is a category in which pretty much every UNSC ship can fit into. And that's about it. Please let me know what you think of this interesting little... well, no carrier is little, except the Poseidon. Let me know what you think of this interesting big ship. I plan on diving into a Covenant ship next time, for the first time, not a Banished or Sangheili ship, but a true blue, true purple Covenant ship, the Sonaris Pattern Heavy Destroyer. See y'all in the next one, and thank you so much for 2,000 subscribers, followed up by 3,000 2 days later, and it appears like I'm gonna hit 4,000 in a day or two. Absolutely insane. One more big thank you for letting me use your models. Thank you, Sins of the Prophets. You're awesome.